The highest standard that Jesus preached was in the Sermon on the Mount. Amazing standards when you read of it. Anger is equal to murder. Have you ever heard that? That's what Jesus said in the Sermon on the Mount. But I find even very few believers believe that. The equivalent of murder in the Old Testament is anger in the New Testament. Don't murder, don't get angry. And the equivalent of committing adultery in the Old Testament is lusting with the eyes in the New Testament. Again, Matthew chapter 5. But how many believers believe that? How much do we hear it preached in the churches? The equivalent of love your neighbor and hate your enemy in the New Testament is love your enemy too. So he proclaimed such high standards. For example, he said, when you pray, don't let anybody know that you're praying. When you fast, don't ever let anybody know that you fast. And when you give, don't let anyone know that you give. And yet, there's such a tendency in us to let people know that we pray or we fast or we give. And at the end of preaching that high standard, you know what he said at the end of it? In Matthew chapter 5 and chapter 6, he preached this very high standard. And at the end of that, notice the very first statement he makes is, don't judge other people. Matthew 7 verse 1. Did you notice the connection? After preaching the highest standard that no human being had ever preached in any religious group, he said, now the danger is, if as you try to live by this standard described in Matthew 5 and chapter 6, the great danger, and we've been preaching Matthew 5 and 6 in this church for many years. The very next thing he says, be careful that you don't judge other people. Don't look for that speck in somebody's eye. And I believe that we need to hear that again and again and again. Even, you can say you love your wife and yet you can be looking for specks there. You may not say it, but you could have an attitude towards your wife or your husband saying, why does he do that? You may control yourself by not saying it, but that attitude can ruin your relationship in marriage. How many people believe that? How many people are quick to judge themselves saying, I shouldn't have that attitude. The Lord has told me, don't judge. Don't judge does not mean that I don't just express it. Judgment is an inward thing. It means I should not even form that judgmental opinion about somebody. It's a very high standard. But it's no use keeping all those high standards in the New Testament. I don't lust, I don't get angry, I've got victory over all that. I don't tell other people how much I pray, I don't tell other people how much I fast. Great. But then I judge other people. It's like making a beautiful dish, cooking a beautiful dish and then putting a dead lizard inside it. You spoil the whole thing. It's exactly what's happening. How do I know? I've done it myself. That's how I know. You make this wonderful dish, cook something, and then spoil it all by judging others. Put one dead lizard inside and ruin the whole thing.